There are two ways a man can break. The first is a violent shatter, a loud, explosive moment where everything comes crashing down for the world to see. It's a spectacle. It draws a crowd. But the second is far more terrifying. It's the slow, silent erosion, a fade to gray. He doesn't shatter, he dissolves. He doesn't scream, his voice just gets quieter until it's gone. He becomes a ghost in his own life, a polite smile in a crowded room, a shadow haunting the edges of photographs. This was his way. He didn't lose a fight, he simply stopped fighting. The world didn't knock him down, it just walked past him. The laughter wasn't even directed at him anymore. It was simply in the air, a sound from a party he was no longer invited to. His name, once spoken with promise, became an afterthought, then a memory, then nothing at all. The people who once called him friend now spoke of him in the past tense. He was a good guy, they'd say, as if he were already gone. And in a way, he was. The fire in his eyes had been reduced to a pilot light, flickering, about to be extinguished by the slightest breeze of indifference. One night, the emptiness became a physical weight. He stood in his silent apartment, the city lights painting blurry streaks on the glass, and he saw his reflection. He didn't see a man. He saw a vacancy, a hollowed-out shell. There was no one to call, no one to text, no one was coming. That was the moment the floor gave way, not with a crash, but with a quiet, sickening descent into absolute rock bottom. And in that abyss, where all hope goes to die, a single, cold thought surfaced. Good. Now we can begin. He didn't seek a guru. He didn't buy a course. He didn't post a single quote about rising from the ashes. He walked to his mirror, looked the hollow man in the eyes, and made a covenant, a blood oath with the man he was meant to be. He said, "The version of you that accepted this, the one who waited for permission, who begged for validation, who withered under their judgment, he dies tonight. I am killing him, and I will burn his memory for fuel." That was the last time he cried, not tears of sadness, but of rage, a pure, cold, clarifying rage directed at only one person, himself. He was his own problem, and therefore he would have to be his own solution. His first act of war was silence. He deleted the apps. He silenced the notifications. He cut the lines of communication to every fair-weather friend and every hollow acquaintance. He didn't announce his departure. He simply vanished from the digital world, becoming a ghost in the machine. He chose to be an outcast because he understood a profound truth. You cannot hear your own voice when you are deafened by the noise of the world. He was entering a monastery of his own making, and the only God he would be worshiping was discipline. His alarm was set for 4 a.m. The first few weeks, that sound was a physical assault. The cold floor was a shock. His bed was a siren, luring him back with the promise of soft, warm failure. But the covenant he made was stronger. He would rise, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. It was non-negotiable. While the world slept, he went to war. The first front was the body. He found a rusted, gritty gym where the only music was the clang of iron and the sound of strained breathing. This wasn't about looking good. This was about building armor. Every bead of sweat was a weakness leaving his body. Every painful rep was a quiet no to the man he used to be. The agony was the point. He learned to love the burn, to chase the pain, because it was proof of life. It was a signal that the old, soft version of him was being melted down and reforged in iron and armor. The second front was the mind. His library card became his most valuable possession. He devoured books like a starving man. He didn't read for pleasure, he read for ammunition. Finance. history, philosophy, psychology. He was reverse engineering the success he saw in others, not the flashy kind, but the quiet, unshakable confidence of men who understood the world and their place in it. He stopped consuming content and started studying it. He realized his mind had been a field of weeds, anxiety, self-doubt, limiting beliefs. He began the slow, arduous process of pulling each one out by the root. And the third and most difficult front was the soul. He embraced a brutal, crushing solitude. He took long walks with no music, no podcasts, just the sound of his own thoughts. At first, it was hell. The silence was filled with his failures, his regrets, his insecurities. They screamed at him, but he didn't run. He sat with them. He listened to his demons until they ran out of things to say. He faced the ugly truths about himself without flinching. He learned to be his own counselor, his own mentor, his own friend. In that sacred, terrifying silence, he learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. He was alone, and for the first time, it felt like power. Months bled into a year, then two. The world had long forgotten him. He was a story they no longer told. And then he reappeared. It wasn't an entrance. There was no spotlight. He just started existing in their spaces again. But he was different. The change was so profound it was unsettling. He didn't walk into a room, he occupied it. His posture was straight, his gaze was level and calm. He had an economy of motion, a quiet stillness that was more powerful than any loud declaration. He spoke less, but when he did, his words were measured, precise. They carried weight. There was no trace of the nervous, approval-seeking boy they remembered. In his place stood a man who was utterly self-contained, a man who didn't need anything from anyone in the room. The whispers started. "Is that him? What happened to him?" Someone finally got the courage to ask him directly at a social gathering. "Man, it's been a forever. You look incredible. What have you been doing? What's your secret?" He looked at them, a faint, unreadable smile on his face. He remembered their sneers. He remembered their silence when he was drowning. And he felt nothing. No anger, no desire to gloat. It was like looking at a chapter from a book he'd finished reading long ago. He simply said, "I've just been working." The answer was so simple, so anticlimactic that it left them confused, because they wanted a shortcut, a hack, a secret. They couldn't comprehend the truth that he had simply paid a price they were unwilling to pay. He had walked through a fire they were too afraid to even approach. His transformation wasn't a secret, it was a sacrifice. And you can't explain a sacrifice to those who have only ever known comfort. This is the lesson. To every man listening who feels lost in the noise, who feels the world has counted him out, you are allowed to disappear. You are commanded to. Shut it all down. The world will not miss you, and that is the most liberating gift you will ever receive. No one is watching, which means you are finally free to build. Build yourself in the dark. Lay the foundation of your character, brick by painful brick. Forge your mind into a weapon and your body into a shield. Become the architect of your own soul. Let your currency be discipline, not motivation. Let your fuel be your purpose, not their praise. Find comfort in the boredom of progress, the unglamorous, repetitive daily work. That is where magic is made. That is where kings are crowned. And when you return, not for them, but for you, you will not need to announce your arrival. Your presence will be the announcement. Your energy will be the introduction. You will have built your own kingdom within yourself, and a king does not need the validation of peasants. Let them gasp. Let them stare. Let them rewrite history and claim they always believed in you. you will know the truth. They weren't with you in the gym at 4 a.m. They weren't with you in the library on a Friday night. They weren't with you in the crushing silence when you faced your own demons. You were there, and you didn't just survive. You built a kingdom from the ruins. And that is a victory no one can ever take away. Now go, disappear, and build.